So today's video is going to be a little bit different. And it's going to be about predators versus prey, the mosquito and the bald eagle. So birds may not see predators coming all the time, but they're professionals at dodging them. Birds particularly hate the smell of methyl anthranilate, known as which is an ether of anthralic acid. This methyl anthraline that birds do not like, or has a strong grape smell. It's a very strong fruity grape smell, and it is also used as a flavoring agent. Okay, so this is really weird already. Why do the birds hate this so much? So it turns out that this flavoring agent is not only specifically used in grape Kool-Aid, the artificial sweetener saccharin, pharmaceuticals. Phenamic acid is derived from anthralic acid and is used actually to produce aspirin, azo dyes, and this strong grape smell that birds hate is also found and used to make perfume and perfume bases, including perfumes that mimic the smell of oranges and also jasmine. So think about how many products are out there that might be hiding these different scents or flavors that birds they don't like it. And I will explain why they don't like it. Methyl anthranilate is a bird repellent, actually. So this bird repellent is literally being used inside of foods and perfumes and dyes and pharmaceuticals and everything. It's a bird repellent. It's a killer. So they, aka the government, are thinking about using anthranilate-based insect repellents instead of DEET. I do not approve. So I do not approve of DEET, and I do not approve of any of these insect repellents or bird repellents that are anthranilate derived or derived. And here is why. It is because the skeletal structure of the molecule anthranilate repellents or ethers are extremely similar to the DEET chemical molecular structure, and they target the same neurons within the biological system. So it's just a different form, but it affects the same exact systems. It's just under a different name, or they're trying to brand it under a different. They'll change one thing in the chemical formula and then call it a different name or something. And we don't want that. In fact, it should all be banned, in my opinion. Anthrallated-based insect repellents, I'm probably saying all these words wrong, some of which the FDA has approved as a food additive, also include methyl anthranilate, which is what we just talked about, N,N-dimethylanthranilic acid, or DMA, ethyl anthranilate, or EA, and butyl anthranilate, or BA. So there's various different forms, and I'm sure those are only a few. I'm sure there's more. All of them are included. Anything that has a skeletal structure with 1 to 3 atoms being the same, we're gonna just go put it under the same category. DEET can be found in most wholesale insect repellents as an active ingredient, and is thought to be the most common and effective product out there to repel or deter and also decline the mosquito and insect population. But once again, this insect repellent also works as a bird repellent. It may negatively interact with sunscreen. So DEET, or any chemical product that has a skeletal molecular structure similar to DEET, might negatively interact with sunscreen. So this is actually highly concerning in my opinion, because then, you're the blissful individual over here like, oh no, ew, bugs. I personally love bugs, but for those that do not like bugs, they probably spray themselves all over or cover themselves with this insect repellent, and they probably are also the type to spray poisons or other such things, or even put out bird repellent, who knows. And then they're probably out in the sun, and they might even also put on sunscreen. So now, in the summer, when the sun's out, some people might put on some sunscreen, and then they might also put on this insect repellent, and together they do not interact well, and they do increase the risk of causing a chemical or bodily type of harm within your body. And I find it even more concerning that the media, whether on television or just as an advertised product on the shelves within stores or magazines, just anywhere where anything can be advertised, the radio, anything, both the DEET or the DEET-like products, the insect repellents, and sunscreen are both separately marketed, but marketed together, almost like one sitting in this aisle, and in the next aisle you'll see that one, and you're going to both buy them around the same time. And no such warning is given by the government or any of the companies or anybody else. Like, nobody's warning anybody that you shouldn't be putting them on together, for sure. You shouldn't be putting them on to begin with, and I'll explain why. But putting them on together is probably even worse. DEET is toxic to various fish and other aquatic organisms, along with freshwater zooplankton, and at most risk are algae colonies, who have experienced extreme biomass destruction, which caused environmental conditions to shift, potentially causing a decline in other aquatic species who depend upon algae as a food source, or just, to keep the general living environment optimal for their survival, by either adding a certain amount of oxygen or by taking out, some type of other chemical in the water that might be harmful to particular aquatic species or organisms. Arid conditions and also fungi have the ability to biodegrade DEET. They do it pretty quickly. It also makes it less toxic for the zooplankton if these conditions exist. But anaerobic conditions cause it to deteriorate very slowly and not optimal. Heavy DEET exposure causes decline and impairment in cognitive functions, muscles, insomnia, seizures, mood disturbances. It can cause many issues, including fertility issues. And this is where we start getting into the actual fertility issues, and this is like a whole section by itself. MDA has no effect on oviposition or egg-laying abilities, while EA, BA, and DEET deterred oviposition, which the strongest effect observed for BA. Thus, we confirmed that EA and DEET are generally repellent, while MDA is repellent only in host-seeking context, and BA is deterrent only in oviposition context. These compounds appear potential use in mosquito control programs. So all these EA, BA, DEET, MDA, these are all the chemicals that I mentioned earlier that the FDA has essentially approved at one point or another, not only either as a food additive or flavoring agent, or even in perfumes, pharmaceuticals, or insect repellent or bird repellent. And that we have already established several times we should not be using these chemicals. They are bad. They cause problems. Even states right here that they cause problems with the formation of eggs. Okay, not only in mosquitoes, but as you will learn further on as I get into this, also in humans. Researchers have uncovered evidence hinting that the most common bug spray ingredient, DEET, or any alike skeletal system, might cause reproductive problems by affecting the formation of egg cells during pregnancy, or even like you don't have to be pregnant, it can just be you, the female, having eggs inside you, or you, the male, having sperms inside you, and they are going to, their formation and DNA health and sequences are going to be heavily affected by this chemical. Meiosis is the type of cell division that creates eggs and sperm. DEET was one of our top hits in terms of chromosomes not separating correctly. So eggs end up with abnormal numbers of chromosomes. In humans, this can cause miscarriages, stillbirths, infertility, and genetic conditionings such as Down syndrome. This is a Harvard little quote. The last quote was also a Harvard quote. And the quote before that was from PubMed, NCBINLM.gov. So, in the last three little sections, paragraphs that I read just now were actually real sources, not something that I read. DDT, or dichlorodiphenyl trilurothane, is the reason that the bald eagle population and other raptors began to decline, potentially due to egg shell thinning caused by exposure. So DDT, along with DEET, and I even think potentially all the other chemicals I mentioned earlier that repel birds, or are in that class, or have a similar skeletal structure, including DDT, or dichlorodiphenyl trilurothane, is the reason that the bald eagle population and other raptors like ospreys and brown pelicans began to decline, and it is most likely due to the fact that these chemicals caused also reproductive harm inside of the bald eagle and other such predators, bird predators, and when they laid their eggs, the eggs were too soft, thus the embryo inside of their eggs could not survive, because just the eggs, they were too thin. So this poison was causing not only the mosquitoes' eggs and reproductive system to be messed up so they could, quote, control the mosquito population. But now we're also affecting the actual eggs, the physical egg structure of the birds. And I also mentioned above, like, it's giving humans fertility problems, and the birds physically allow the humans to see what happens. The bald eagle is the perfect number one example of what is happening in America. It's ridiculous. This is why I should be president. I'm assuming they ate poisoned DDT insects. They drank from contaminated water sources, or were poisoned themselves with just the repellents, the bird repellents, or even using the methylanthroline bird repellent, all which causes reproductive issues or infertility in insects, birds, and humans alike by negatively impacting reproductive functions. Since 1972, DDT has been banned in the USA, but then, they replaced it with DEET, which can still be found in many products, including insect repellent for human use. If applied correctly, DEET should be safe, or so they state. But the individual, so I'm spraying it on me, I'm letting it soak in, whatever, I wash my hands. I might unknowingly get busy into my activity outside and touch my arm. Oops, I touched my face. I might eat something, and now I have consumed this applied product of DEET or other such similar chemical, which might result in direct internal biological or bodily harm, because now I consumed it. And it does state that consuming the product is bad. Like, it can have bad effects. You shouldn't do that. You can only safely apply it to your skin. This would suggest an agenda. The United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave, whose symbolic bird is the bald eagle. The United States government knew the negative impact that DDT, DEET, and structurally similar potential chemicals alike would have on multiple life levels. They are responsible for using the malaria and the Zika virus and mosquitoes to induce fear into the public, and they claim to look for cures, while in reality, under everyone's noses, made a large number of individuals found within the United States over a long period of time infertile. They caused cancers, birth defects like Down syndrome, and also nearly eradicating their own country's symbolic bird, the bald eagle, by exposing them to these DDT, DEET, anthranilate-based insect repellents, including BA, methylanthranilate, EA, and DMA, among others. They did this, I believe, to control the population, fertility rates, and the death rates, domestic and foreign political climates, including policies, laws, and regulations, by claiming and inducing fear within the public about mosquito-borne diseases, and to protect themselves against these diseases and insects by using these inconspicuous insect repellent poisons, and then, advertising them, selling them, making money from them. Ironically, in an earlier study, it stated that mosquitoes actually prefer reptile and amphibian blood due to being able to produce healthier eggs than using human blood. So here's the little quote. This is a quote. It is by parasitesandvectors.biocentral.com. And it states, Reviews of early literature suggest that anatogenous mosquitoes, which are ones that need blood to produce more eggs, after blood feeding on amphibians, reptiles, or other birds than on mammals, and we would be considered a mammal. Amino acid balance and the nucleated erythrocytes of amphibians, reptiles, and birds have been suggested to be more suitable for egg formation than the amino acid composition and anucleate erythrocytes of mammalian blood. The packed cell volume of the blood has been shown to influence reproductive fitness, survival, and vectorial capacity in mosquito species that undergo pre-duries, i.e., the concentrate red blood cells in midgut and excrete plasma continuously while blood feeding. The most abundant protein in bovine plasma, serum albumin, has been shown to stimulate high levels of egg formations in A. aegypti and select other species of mosquitoes. So then comes the question that the United States then government, who knew about these insect repellents, who knew what they would do to multiple levels of organisms, purposefully misled them, induced fear, but then also does using insecticides and insect/bird repellents not only cause a decline in mosquito fertility, but also increases a decline in fertility rates of other species, including birds, amphibians, aquatic and mammals, including humans, because of a lower natural blood food source, since the reptiles and amphibians and birds are becoming less and less since they're also being exposed to it. The mosquitoes are essentially forced or led by the government to begin attacking the humans. Because, like, if all the birds are dying out and all the amphibians and reptiles are slowly dying out and the mosquitoes suddenly don't have them as a food source anymore, they're going to go to the next food source, which is humans. They don't like humans normally, but I guess if a human is around, they can work with it. And if there's no food left, then they have no choice but to go to humans. And then the government seemed to have been aware of this, so they reduced their own populations of different animal species and then diverted the mosquitoes towards the humans. And then when the humans were scared of getting this malaria that the government suddenly then, or Zika virus that the government suddenly then began blaring over the media and making a public panic about, just like the other virus that recently occurred, it then gave them the perfect excuse to begin advertising and selling DEET and other such insect repellents to consumers to effectively make them infertile in a silent scheme. So they didn't even have to say a word. They just could start out with the mosquitoes, not say a word, and then make a whole population infertile on multiple species levels, not just humans. That's how big this scheme seems to have been. The proof is clear. If they were truly not guilty, why did the U.S. government not make the public aware through media sources that advertises both insect repellents and sunscreen that if they both are applied together, they may have a higher likelihood of causing an adverse impact and reaction or bodily harm? So they had the choice to state this. They knew this all along for all these years, but instead they kept silent, and they watched as everyone put it on, and then complained, and then on top of that, we're like, haha, these viruses, better apply more poison. That's essentially what they're doing. Humans are the mosquitoes. Mosquitoes were just the excuse. And the American government seems to hate its own citizens and country so much it gave everyone a clue by almost eradicating their own country's symbolic bird, the bald eagle. The recovery of the bird population, this is a quote by the EPA.gov, after the use of DDT was banned is an example of the mitigation of the effect following manipulation of the cause, and is very strong evidence that the use of DDT, among other DEET and other molecularly skeletal similar molecules, are in fact a true cause of bald eagle and other bird prey populations decline, because not only were the insects and all their food sources poisoned, but that also caused their eggs when they consumed them for food. You know, when the birds are eating all these mosquitoes and stuff, their eggs are getting messed with because now they're consuming all this poison, and now their eggs just don't form correctly and have a hard shell. So it's a direct result, and we are eating all these birds, we're using the same products just for fun, to look pretty and all this stuff, on top of spraying it all over ourselves and spraying it all in the yard. And it's terrible. It should be a crime. So I have like 2 or 3 more pages written. And a lot of these are just like medical studies and quotes, but they essentially, I'm not going to read them. I'm going to stop where I stop, but they are essentially supporting statements, supporting essentially everything that I state, plus proving, you know, it essentially talks about what type of blood chemicals within the body that the mosquitoes particularly need to form their own eggs, and what might cause less egg production is what it mentions. And then I also talk about the Zika virus. I talk about the malaria virus, how it, you know, like infects the liver, and then how exactly it begins spreading, which I'm actually going to read that part. Inside of the liver wall, made up of a tubed sinuous barrier that also branch off into bodies, into blood vessel bodies, who houses and uses Kupfer cells. Kupfer is German for copper, to break down red blood cells by trapping them, digesting them into 2 things. Number 1, bile. You go to the bathroom, you get out all the waste. And number 2, it also sends the reusable blood components into the hepatocytes to be recycled within the body. A person becomes infected with malaria by being bitten by an infected mosquito, or even Zika. The malaria virus enters the individual's bloodstream, traveling directly to the liver, where they first mature and then begin infecting red blood cells. In humans, the parasite grow and multiply first in the liver cells and then in the red blood cells of the blood. In the blood, successive broods of parasites grow inside the red cells and destroy them, releasing daughter parasites or merocytes that continue the cycle by invading other cells. And like, it made me realize something about like parasites and viruses. It's like it goes into the opposite direction than what we would normally think of how stuff would go. It's like it's the opposite. And it almost appears as if certain parasites and viruses, like malaria, purposefully travel to the liver to become digested. It's like they are an unfertilized hard seed that has to go into these Kupfer, be broken down by these Kupfer cells to essentially crack and shed its like protective shell that allows it to, you know, like penetrate from here to begin with and travel throughout the body. And it essentially then sheds all its extra components when it gets digested by these Kupfer cells, and that then tricks these cells because it then leaves only a C like terminal the malaria virus only leaves one C terminal. It sheds everything else, all other terminals, and then it allows it to penetrate and inject itself into red blood cells, using these GPI anchors, these GPI peptide chains found on the C terminal. I go into detail explaining this, or have little quotes or sources explaining this, and that's what I'm not reading. But I thought that was really weird how viruses, instead of building themselves, they purposefully are already built a certain way and then break themselves completely down to their most skeletal system, so they only have one main terminal that they can then inject themselves with at the right plug-in or something inside of the cell. I guess that's kind of how they work, and that's kind of like really trippy to think about. I talk about like all kinds of like expressions and terminals and sites as to what all they can do, and then towards the end of my writing, as you see, I talk about stem cells, progenitor cells, and the chromosomes, the telomeres, and how that essentially ties into the red blood cells, the bone marrow, being infected with such a thing as malaria, or even exposed to such a thing as DEET or such a chemical, and how it might cause cancers, like what types of cancers, why. I talk about the male and the female, like egg and sperm cells, the particular cells, and how they might begin secreting too much, like hormones or not enough hormones, and how this might cause certain cancers, including blood cancers, how it might cause infertility and all this stuff. Like, it's all linked here, it's all written here, and then essentially the stem cells and the progenitor cell little section essentially kind of defines or begins defining how it should already have been cured or could be cured, and how the government is just messing around. Because if I can understand all this about stem cells, like, so various distinct methenial daughter stem cell clusters to form a single progenitor cell, which creates a cortisol column, which is like the input or output telomere receptor of neurons. The end of the 46 chromosome sequence, so here's our little X, or our 46 chromosomes that define, like the human genome, is responsible for encoding a single neuron whose telomere receptor feet. So like I have the X right here, and the like top parts and bottom parts of the X are the little telomere feet, which ultimately are also the neuron ends, who can transmit and receive the electromagnetic chemical signals within the body that determine growth, healing, metabolism, aging, and diseases. The toes of the neuron feet made up of the coordinal column, each being a different shape and responsible for a specific function that ultimately determines the type of progenitor cells produced. It is important to note that something that indefinitely grows or replicates is also the definition of a tumor or cancer. The stem cells must have a specific stop sequence encoded within its DNA and RNA, and perhaps a target progenitor cell sequence is the key, so the target stem cell knows how to differentiate between various cell types that make up the various organ system layer types and systems, and knows when to stop growing because it is pre-coded into its own genes through the various yet particular progenitor cell sequences. And the endothelial progenitor cell is responsible for regenerative properties of the endothelial blood vessel lining, and that starts going into squamous lymphatic nervous system and blood vessels and like blood cancer and issues like that, also caused by DEET and other such chemicals, smoking, just random sicknesses or diseases, that might affect the blood and or the lymph system, including many cancers and other diseases. These hematopoietic stem cells is the source of these blood cells. They can be found in the red bone marrow in your body in adults, or in the mesoderm, which is the middle germ layer of 3 layers in an embryo, which eventually then form tissues found within the heart, skeletal, so the red bone marrow, and smooth muscles, tubule kidney cells, red blood cells, non-epithelial cells, mesoderm, and coleocytes, which are leukocytes or hollow white blood immune cells that devour invaders found within the column organ, which is like the Column's organ. You never really hear about that. It's like in your abdominal cavity, which is like a shock absorber and immunity chamber, who is lined with these things. And it seems that like the cure is there. They just don't want to give it. And everything I stated in the reason above, I know this bottom part didn't really make sense because I didn't really feel like reading it, but I'll have it written underneath the video. You can read it yourself if you're interested in all the more medical stuff or like sources and stuff. And yeah. What's up? What's up, America? What is up, America? Why are you doing this to yourselves? Why are you letting people up top do this to you? They just get to live the time of their lives, and then you're gonna let them poison you and decide, and then, I guess nobody cares. Sometimes people claim they care, but then they're too busy and too engrossed in their life to even notice, I guess, or to have time to care or something. But I guess that's why I take the time to care and make a video about it. But I find that concerning. You should make me president instead. We can fix all this. We can fix all these problems. Not be so deceitful. Get a little bit healthier. Not be killing our own entire species on Earth. Not just our species, but every species. For no reason at all. But profit. Profit and power. Humans are evil, I swear. But yeah. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.